Hello everyone, my name is Connor and welcome to Conned into Tech. Now today we're going to be talking about TV panel technology. Now with recent advancements over the last few years, what we found is a whole slew of new initialisms and jargon to get our head around. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go over the major ones of these just so we can get a good idea of what is out there and hopefully help you make a good choice on your next TV. Now firstly, we're going to start with the standard LED panel. Now LED stands for Light Emitting Diode. Now how this panel technology works is to have a series of white LEDs arranged either around the edge or behind the panel itself. Now what these then do is pass through a series of color filters of red, green and blue to give us our image. With these panels, what you really want to be looking for is a backlit panel. Now, because they are arranged behind the screen, they can give you a much more uniform light distribution, and in the case of full array local dimming, actually turn off and on in order to give you a much better contrast and black levels within your scene. One of the cons of particularly with edge-lit screens is because that light is coming from the edges, what you'll notice is potentially blooming on the outside with a very uneven distribution of light throughout the image. Now this isn't always the case, so it's definitely best just to go into that local store and have a look at these displays. But if you are looking at the LED panel technology, I really would advise trying to aim for a backlit one if your budget stretches that far. Now the next panel that we're going to be looking at is the QLED panel. Now this panel is pioneered by Samsung and stands for Quantum Dot Light Emitting Diode Panel. Now this quantum dot layer that they're mentioning here is very important because it's used in quite a lot of the higher end TVs as well. Now this layer is basically a series of nanoparticles, very tiny particles that are when hit with a light, emit either red, green or blue depending on the size of that particle. So in a QLED panel, it fires a white light from behind, hits this nanoparticle layer and then fires out red, green or blue depending on the size of that particle. Now this has a few advantages. One of those is because it is not filtering through a color filter, it can be brighter. Since those nanoparticles are emitting that light, you get brighter colors and a wider range of color within these TVs. Now when you combine this with full array local dimming, you can get better contrast and better color in a QLED TV. Now we'll move on from Samsung's proprietary technology into LG's with Nanocell technology. Now Nanocell technology is very similar to quantum dot technology in the fact that it uses very tiny particles to change the image that we see. However, it uses them at a different phase of the process, resulting in different results. Now with this nanocell technology, it works like a normal LED TV. You have LEDs in the back that shine through, color filters, and then hit the liquid crystal display that then gives us our image. It is at this part of the phase that these nanocells are used. So when that light passes through those color filters, they then pass through the nanocell filters to give us much clearer colors, much more natural colors than we would see on a regular LED TV. Now this, combined with full array local dimming, gives the nanocell TVs a beautiful crisp image, as well as nice contrast ratios in there. However, it's not quite as good at quantum dot technology in the fact that it doesn't have the brightness and as wide a color range because they are still passing through those three color filters. It's important to recognize when you're comparing those two TVs. Mini LED technology is a very simple but complex again advancement in TV technology. What it means is instead of going from hundreds of potentially backlit LEDs, so those white lights that shine from behind, now go to thousands. Now the added benefit of this is that it can potentially give you a lot more dimming zones depending on the technology within the TV, allowing for better contrast and better shadow detail. Now this is important when understanding the next TVs that are coming up, specifically the QNED and Neo-QLED TVs. Now the Neo-QLED TV is Samsung's utilization of this mini LED technology. What they do is they combine their QLED TVs with their quantum dot layer with this mini LED technology to have, instead of hundreds, but thousands of mini LEDs behind the display. And what this means is, because these LEDs that are shining this white light are so tiny, they can sit pretty much one for one behind a lot of these pixels. Now what this means is that you can turn that little white LED off and therefore have almost true black within that pixel. Because you're still using this full array dimming feature, some of those LEDs are going to bleed into each other, so you'll never get perfect black with this technology. However, what you will get is increased brightness, much better contrast and shadow detail than you will in a regular QLED or other TV, and lovely color. So it's definitely something to be aware of when it comes to those Neo-QLED TVs. Now the final panel that we're going to look at that uses the regular LED panel technology is the QNED TV. Now this is basically LG's version of the Neo-QLED, in the fact that it uses a series of very tiny white lights behind that shine through a quantum dot layer to give us beautiful colors and wonderful brightness. Now how this differs to the Neo-QLED is actually their panel technology. So LG uses what we call an IPS panel technology, and Samsung uses a VA panel technology. Now without going too far into these, what it basically means is that the LG's panel can give you better color and better viewing angles, whereas the Samsung TV gives you much better contrast ratios. So that can be very important if you're looking at these two TVs and deciding which one might be the right one for you. Now we come to the biggest advancement in TV technology over recent years, and that is the OLED panel. Now OLED stands for Organic Light Emitting Diode, and as the name suggests, has an organic material inside the TV panel. Now how this works is that there is organic material within each red, green and blue subpixel that, when a current is passed through, that material emits that color of light. Now this has four main advantages and four main cons. Now advantages: 1, because it doesn't need LEDs behind it, it can be extraordinarily thin. 2, beautiful color. Because all of that is right next to the display and you're not having any LEDs shining through to wash out that color, it means you get crisp color throughout the display. Number 3 is response time. Because you're not having to filter that light through at all, any lag from input to the screen is pretty much diminished. Now the final one and the most important one is contrast. Because each of those pixels are self-lit, when they're off, they're off. Pure black. Infinite contrast ratio, which gives you those gorgeous contrasts within scenes that really add to the picture detail. Then there's 4 main disadvantages. 1, because it is using organic material, it deteriorates. This leads to 2 disadvantages in its own right. Now that is that when it hits peak brightness, it can't stay there very long, otherwise that material starts to deteriorate. So it then needs to pull back, meaning that overall the brightness level is much lower than standard LED TVs. This also means that the lifespan of a TV itself is potentially limited. So as that organic material deteriorates over time, you might find the quality of a TV start to deteriorate in its own right. Number 3 in terms of disadvantages is the potential for screen burn-in. Because those LEDs are right by the screen, the heat of those can potentially cause screen burn-in. So it is something to be aware of. However, this is mitigated and pretty much non-existent with most modern TVs, especially in the time we tend to have them. Lastly, now this one's an interesting one because each of these pixels has an extra white subpixel in there in order to boost the brightness of the blue color. Now what this means is, instead of being an RGB display, they're often a WRGB display. So in order to hit those peak HDR moments, that white subpixel needs to come on, thereby potentially washing out a bit of the color that you see in those peak brightness scenarios. So that can be something to be aware of, particularly if you're wanting to watch all of this beautiful HDR content. Now, as manufacturers are well aware of the limitations of OLED panels, they've been doing their level best to try and improve that panel technology. LG's foray into this is with their OLED Evo panel. Now, how these differ from regular OLED panels is by using two things. One is an extra green filter on the green part of the pixel in order to give a wider range of color. Now, the biggest improvement, however, is a heavier element being used within the blue subpixel. Now, this means that that blue can maintain a higher brightness than regular OLED panels. Important because that is obviously the main limitation of an OLED panel, not being able to sustain a peak brightness. This heavier element gives them that ability to maintain that peak brightness for that little bit longer. Now, unfortunately, obviously, still doesn't get quite as bright anyway as an LED panel, but it is one of their forays into making it a bit better. Samsung's foray into the improvement of OLED panels has resulted in the quantum dot OLED display, or QD-OLED. Now, what this uses is that quantum dot panel technology we talked about earlier in the video to change light to red, green, and blue. Now, what's important about this quantum dot technology is that these nanoparticles don't necessarily need a white light coming from behind to emit red, green, or blue. They can use any light. So what Samsung has done is used the blue emissive layer, which, because blue is the hardest one for OLEDs to actually display due to its high wavelength, they've used a big emissive display of blue behind these nanoparticles that change this blue organic light into red and green. And the blue pixel just shines through. Now, this has a few advantages. One, because of how bright this can then get, they can get rid of that white subpixel that we spoke about in the OLED part of the video. This means that in HDR parts of the zone, this color isn't washed out by the extra white subpixel. So we can get bright without washing out the color, resulting in a wider color gamut across the board, as well as having a brighter display than a regular OLED panel. So it's quite a big improvement in that regard. We still get the beautiful viewing angles of an OLED display, but we still don't get the brightness of a regular LED, and that's something to be aware of in these displays. And it is why Samsung hasn't actually pushed their quantum dot OLED as their flagship. That goes to their Neo-QLEDs. So the fact these can't get quite as bright mean that in a particularly bright room, it might not be the best choice for you. However, because they do get brighter than standard OLEDs, if you've got the money, it can be a very good choice if you've got a dark or medium light room to go for. Beautiful crisp black still, as every single pixel turns itself off and on, and a beautifully thin display. Now, the final TV panel technology we're going to talk about today isn't really for consumers, but is worthwhile just to go over, just so we understand where this technology could be headed. This panel technology is called micro LED, not to be confused with mini LED technology. Micro LED is a series of inorganic red, green, and blue diodes that emit light, so they don't need a white light to filter through them. Now, what this means is that it can get as bright as an LED panel with the beautiful color range and contrast that an OLED panel would have. Now, this seems like it's the best of both worlds, and in most cases it certainly is. The biggest issue is price. Now, these micro LEDs, there isn't a consumer one available. Samsung's The Wall at 155 inches still costs about 300,000 US or 350,000 pounds. So it's not really a consumer level material thing just yet. However, once production costs of these go down, we'll hopefully find these coming to consumer grade TVs within a few years. Thank you everyone for watching this video. I do hope that you found it moderately useful when coming to buying your next TV. If you have any questions at all, please make sure to ask in the comments section below. And if you've got any more insight to give that could potentially help others who have come here, please make sure also to share that in the comment section. All information is useful, and there will be things I certainly haven't covered in this video, so it may be a question that someone else is asking. Thank you again for watching. My name is Connor. This was Conned into Tech. Have a good one.